What if I told you that your anxiety isn't your enemy, but actually a messenger trying to teach you something profound about the nature of your mind? What if everything you've been doing to fight your anxiety has actually been making it stronger? Stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you is a 2,500-year-old Buddhist teaching that completely transformed how I understood anxiety, and it might just change your life too. Before we dive deep into this ancient wisdom, let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed that the more you try to push anxiety away, the more persistent it becomes? It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push, the more force it takes, and the moment you lose your grip, it explodes back to the surface with even more intensity. This isn't a coincidence, and Buddhism figured this out long before modern psychology ever did. Let me take you back to a moment in my own life when anxiety had me completely trapped. I was lying in bed at 3 in the morning, my heart racing, my mind spinning through worst-case scenarios like a broken record player. I had an important presentation the next day, and instead of sleeping, I was catastrophizing about everything that could go wrong. My chest felt tight, my breathing was shallow, and I kept telling myself to just relax, just calm down, just stop thinking about it. But here's the thing. Every time I told myself to stop being anxious, I became more anxious about being anxious. It was like being stuck in quicksand, where every movement to escape only pulled me deeper. Sound familiar? This is what Buddhists call the second arrow, and understanding this concept alone can revolutionize your relationship with anxiety. The Buddha told a parable about 2 arrows. When you're struck by the first arrow, you feel pain. That's unavoidable. That's the original anxiety, the biological response your body has to perceived threats. But then we shoot ourselves with a second arrow. This second arrow is our resistance to the first arrow, our judgment about having anxiety, our anxiety about being anxious, our shame about not being able to control it, our fear that it means something is fundamentally wrong with us. The Buddha taught that while we can't always avoid the first arrow, we absolutely create and fire that second arrow ourselves. And here's what blew my mind when I first learned this: that second arrow causes far more suffering than the first one ever did. Think about it. Anxiety itself is just a sensation in your body, a collection of thoughts, a biochemical response. But when you add layers of resistance, judgment, and fear on top of that original feeling, you transform a temporary state into prolonged suffering. You turn a passing storm into a permanent climate. So what does Buddhism actually teach us to do instead? The answer might surprise you, because it goes against every instinct we have. Buddhism teaches us not to fight anxiety, not to suppress it, not to distract ourselves from it, but to turn toward it with curiosity and compassion. This is what's called radical acceptance, and it's one of the most powerful tools I've ever encountered. Now, before you think I'm suggesting you just give up and let anxiety run your life, hear me out, because this is much more nuanced and powerful than that. Radical acceptance doesn't mean you like anxiety or want it to stick around. It means you stop adding that second arrow of resistance. It means you acknowledge what's actually happening in the present moment, without layering stories and judgments on top of it. In Buddhist practice, this is done through mindfulness meditation, but it's a very specific kind of mindfulness. You're not trying to achieve a blank mind or some blissed-out state of peace. You're practicing the skill of observing your experience without getting tangled up in it. When anxiety arises, instead of immediately trying to think your way out of it or push it away, you actually pause and get curious about it. What does anxiety actually feel like in your body right now? Where do you notice it? Is it a tightness in your chest, a knot in your stomach, a buzzing energy in your limbs? Does it have a temperature, a texture? Is it moving or static? When you start investigating anxiety this way, something remarkable happens. The anxiety doesn't necessarily disappear, but your relationship to it begins to shift. You start to see that anxiety isn't this monolithic monster. It's actually a collection of sensations, thoughts, and feelings that are constantly changing. And here's the really important part. You begin to realize that you are not your anxiety. You are the awareness that's observing the anxiety. This distinction is crucial, and it's at the heart of Buddhist teaching. In Buddhism, we talk about the concept of anatta, or non-self. This doesn't mean you don't exist. It means that the solid, permanent self you think you are is actually an illusion. When you look closely at your experience, You don't find a fixed self. You find a constantly changing flow of sensations, thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. Your anxiety feels so overwhelming because you've identified with it. You say, "I am anxious," instead of "anxiety is present." You think the anxiety is happening to the core of who you are. But when you practice mindfulness, you start to see that thoughts and emotions arise and pass away like clouds in the sky. You are the sky, not the clouds. The clouds come and go, some are dark and stormy, some are light and fluffy, but the sky remains unchanged, spacious, and able to hold it all. Let me give you a practical example of how this works. The next time you feel anxiety rising instead of your usual response, try this. Pause whatever you're doing if possible. Take a moment to close your eyes or soften your gaze. Take 3 slow, deep breaths, not to make the anxiety go away, but just to anchor yourself in the present moment. Then, with genuine curiosity, start to explore the anxiety. Say to yourself, "This is what anxiety feels like right now." Notice the sensations in your body without trying to change them. Notice the thoughts that are present without believing them or arguing with them. Name what you're experiencing. You might silently say tightness in the chest, thoughts about the future, feeling of dread, rapid heartbeat. This practice of naming is incredibly powerful because it creates a little bit of space between you and the experience. You're no longer drowning in anxiety, you're observing it. You're relating to it rather than from it. This might sound simple, almost too simple to be effective, but I challenge you to actually try it. The reason most people never experience the benefits of this practice is because they read about it or hear about it, but never actually do it. Buddhism isn't a philosophy you just think about. It's a practice you embody. It's like reading about swimming versus actually getting in the water. You can understand the theory perfectly, but until you practice, it won't change your life. Now let's go deeper into another Buddhist teaching that's absolutely essential for understanding anxiety, the concept of impermanence, or anicca. Buddhism teaches that everything in existence is constantly changing. Nothing stays the same. This might sound obvious, but we don't really live like we believe it. When we're anxious, we feel like the anxiety will last forever. We project it into the future. We imagine ourselves feeling this way next week, next month, next year. But this is an illusion created by the mind. If you actually pay close attention to your experience, you'll notice that anxiety isn't constant. It fluctuates, it rises and falls, it intensifies and softens. Even in the middle of a panic attack, if you're able to observe closely, you'll notice that the sensations change moment by moment. Your heart rate accelerates, then decelerates. Your thoughts shift from one worry to another. The tightness in your chest moves or changes intensity. Nothing stays exactly the same, not even for a second. Understanding impermanence at a deep level can be incredibly liberating when it comes to anxiety. It means that no matter how bad you feel right now, it will change. "This too shall pass" isn't just a nice saying, it's a fundamental law of existence. Every emotion, every thought, every sensation is temporary. When you really get this, when you experience it directly through practice, anxiety loses some of its power over you. You stop fearing it so much because you know it won't last. You stop fighting it so desperately because you understand that fighting actually prolongs it. Here's another profound Buddhist insight about anxiety that most people never consider. Buddhism teaches that much of our suffering comes from craving and aversion. We crave pleasant experiences and cling to them, wanting them to last forever. We have aversion to unpleasant experiences and push them away, wanting them to disappear immediately. Anxiety is considered an unpleasant experience, so naturally we have aversion to it. We want it gone. But notice what happens when you have strong aversion to something. You're constantly thinking about it. You're monitoring for it. You're checking to see if it's still there. You're strategizing about how to avoid it. Ironically, your aversion to anxiety keeps anxiety at the center of your attention. This is the painful paradox. The more you try to avoid anxiety, the more present it becomes in your life. The Buddha taught a middle way between craving and aversion. Instead of reaching for pleasant experiences or pushing away unpleasant ones, we can learn to meet each moment with equanimity. Equanimity doesn't mean you don't care or that you're numb to experience. It means you're not adding extra layers of craving or aversion on top of what's already happening. When anxiety arises, equanimity looks like this. You notice the anxiety without immediately needing it to be different. You allow it to be present while also knowing it will change. You neither feed it with attention and worry, nor do you try to suppress it or pretend it's not there. You simply acknowledge, yes, this is uncomfortable, and I can be with this discomfort. This might sound passive, but it's actually incredibly active and requires tremendous courage. It takes real bravery to stop running from your own experience. Our culture teaches us to avoid discomfort at all costs, to medicate it, distract from it, numb it, or think our way out of it. Buddhism offers a radically different path, the path of turning toward our experience with courage and compassion. Let's talk about compassion for a moment, because this is absolutely crucial. When you're struggling with anxiety, how do you talk to yourself? For most people, the inner dialogue is harsh and critical. Why can't I just relax? What's wrong with me? I should be able to handle this. Everyone else seems fine. I'm so weak. This kind of self-talk is the second arrow multiplied. You're not just experiencing anxiety, you're beating yourself up for experiencing it. Buddhism places enormous emphasis on compassion, both for others and for yourself. The practice of metta, or loving-kindness meditation, involves directing phrases of goodwill toward yourself and others. When working with anxiety, self-compassion is transformative. Instead of criticizing yourself for being anxious, you might say, "This is really hard right now, I'm struggling, and that's okay, I'm not alone in this struggle. May I be kind to myself? May I give myself the compassion I need?" This might feel awkward or even silly at first, especially if you're not used to talking to yourself this way. But the research on self-compassion is absolutely clear. People who practice self-compassion experience significantly less anxiety and depression and recover more quickly from difficult experiences. They're also more resilient and more likely to take healthy risks because they know they won't destroy themselves with self-criticism if things don't work out. From a Buddhist perspective, self-compassion is recognizing that suffering is part of the human experience. You're not uniquely broken or flawed because you experience anxiety. Anxiety is part of being a human with a nervous system that evolved to detect threats. The Buddha himself taught that life involves suffering or dukkha. This isn't pessimistic, it's realistic. Once you accept that discomfort is woven into existence, you stop feeling like something has gone terribly wrong when you experience it. You stop adding that extra layer of suffering that comes from thinking you shouldn't feel this way. There's another Buddhist concept that's particularly relevant to anxiety, the concept of attachment to outcomes. So much of anxiety comes from our attachment to specific outcomes and our fear of outcomes we do not want. We worry about the future because we desperately want things to turn out a certain way, and we're terrified they won't. We want to get the job, pass the test, make a good impression, avoid embarrassment, stay healthy, keep our loved ones safe, and maintain control over our lives. The problem is that we actually have far less control than we think we do. Buddhism teaches that attachment to outcomes is a primary source of suffering because we are trying to control the uncontrollable. We can take action, we can do our best, we can make wise choices, but we cannot control outcomes. Too many factors are beyond our influence. When you really understand this, it can be both terrifying and liberating. It's terrifying because we like the illusion of control. It makes us feel safe. But it's liberating because it means you can stop carrying the impossible burden of trying to control everything. You can do your best and then release attachment to how things turn out. This doesn't mean you don't care about outcomes or that you become passive. It means you shift your focus from outcomes you can't control to actions you can control. You focus on being present, making wise choices, acting with integrity, and treating yourself and others with kindness. You let go of the rest. In the context of anxiety about a presentation, for example, you prepare thoroughly, you practice, you do everything within your power to set yourself up for success, and then you let go of attachment to a specific outcome. You can't control whether the audience likes it, whether technical difficulties occur, whether someone asks a question you can't answer. But you can control showing up, doing your honest best, and treating yourself with compassion regardless of how it goes. This kind of release isn't something you do once and you're done. It's a practice. You'll find yourself gripping and trying to control, and then you'll notice it and release again. over and over. This is the practice. Buddhism also teaches about the concept of the wandering mind and how it contributes to anxiety. There's a famous saying that the mind is a wonderful servant but a terrible master. When left unattended, the mind wanders constantly, and research shows that it tends to wander toward negative scenarios. This is an evolutionary feature, not a bug. Our ancestors, who constantly scanned for threats and imagined worst-case scenarios, were more likely to survive than the overly optimistic ones who got eaten by predators. But in the modern world, where most of us aren't facing immediate physical threats, this tendency of the mind to constantly project into the future and imagine problems becomes anxiety. Your mind creates elaborate stories about terrible things that might happen, and then your body responds to those stories as if they're actually happening right now. Your heart races, stress hormones flood your system, and you feel the urgent need to do something to protect yourself from a threat that exists only in your imagination. This is where mindfulness practice becomes incredibly practical. Mindfulness trains you to recognize when your mind has wandered off into anxious stories about the future, and to gently bring it back to the present moment. Because here's the thing, anxiety almost always lives in the future. Right now, in this very moment, are you actually okay? Not tomorrow, not next week, not in the scenario your mind is imagining, but right now. Usually the answer is yes. Right now you're breathing, you're alive, you're okay. The disaster hasn't happened, it's just a thought. The practice is to come back to now over and over again. This doesn't mean you never plan for the future or take precautions. It means you distinguish between useful planning and anxious rumination. Useful planning is specific, time-limited, and action-oriented. You identify a potential problem, you come up with solutions, you take action, and then you move on. Anxious rumination is repetitive, circular, and doesn't lead to action. You think about the same worries over and over without resolution. You imagine scenarios you have no control over. You ask yourself what-if questions that spiral endlessly without answers. When you notice anxious rumination happening, the Buddhist approach is to acknowledge it. Thank your mind for trying to protect you, and then redirect your attention to the present moment. What do you see right now? What do you hear? What sensations are present in your body? This isn't bypassing or avoiding anxiety. It's recognizing that you don't need to follow every thought your mind produces. You can choose where to place your attention. Let's also address the Buddhist understanding of the root causes of anxiety at an even deeper level. Buddhism teaches that ignorance is the root of all suffering. But this isn't ignorance in the sense of lacking information. It's a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of reality and the nature of self. We believe we are separate, isolated individuals who need to protect ourselves in a hostile world. We believe that our happiness depends on getting what we want and avoiding what we don't want. We believe that we can find permanent security and satisfaction in impermanent things. These beliefs are so deeply ingrained that we don't even recognize them as beliefs. We think they're just reality. But Buddhism challenges all of this. Buddhism teaches that we're not separate. We're interconnected with everything and everyone. Our happiness doesn't depend on controlling external circumstances. It comes from the quality of our own minds. And there is no permanent security to be found in changing conditions, only the peace that comes from accepting change. When anxiety arises, it's often because one of these fundamental misunderstandings has been activated. You feel separate and vulnerable. You believe your well-being depends on something external working out a certain way. You're seeking security in something impermanent. The deep work of Buddhist practice is to investigate these beliefs and see through them. This isn't intellectual understanding. It's direct insight that comes from meditation and contemplation. As you see more clearly, as ignorance dissolves into wisdom, anxiety naturally diminishes because the conditions that give rise to it are no longer present. This is what Buddhists call enlightenment or awakening, seeing reality clearly without the distortions of ignorance. Now you might be thinking this all sounds great in theory, but how do you actually practice this when you're in the grip of anxiety? Let me give you a framework that integrates everything we've discussed. When anxiety arises, first, pause and take a few conscious breaths. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system and gives you a moment to respond rather than react. Second, name what's happening. Anxiety is present. Thoughts about the future are arising. Tightness in chest. This creates space between you and the experience. Third, investigate with curiosity. Where do I feel this in my body? What thoughts are present? What am I believing right now? Fourth, drop the second arrow. Notice any judgment, resistance, or anxiety about the anxiety, and see if you can let that go. Fifth, offer yourself compassion. This is difficult. I'm doing the best I can. May I be kind to myself. Sixth, recognize impermanence. This will change. It's already changing. I don't need to make it change. Seventh, return to the present moment. What's actually happening right now? Am I safe right now? Finally, take wise action if needed. Is there something useful I can do right now? If yes, do it. If no, practice being with the discomfort without needing to fix it. This might take 30 seconds or 30 minutes, depending on the intensity of the anxiety. The point isn't to rush through it to make the anxiety disappear. The point is to change your relationship with anxiety so that it no longer controls your life. One of the most powerful things I learned from Buddhism is that you can't think your way out of anxiety. Anxiety happens in the body and in the nervous system, not just in the mind. You can have all the right thoughts and beliefs and still feel anxious because anxiety is a physiological state. This is why practice is so important. Meditation, mindful movement, breathwork and body-based practices actually retrain your nervous system. They teach your body that it's safe to relax, that you can experience discomfort without being destroyed by it, that you are larger than any emotion that passes through you. Over time, with consistent practice, you'll notice that anxiety arises less frequently, less intensely, and passes more quickly. You'll notice that you're less afraid of anxiety because you know how to be with it. You'll notice that you have more space around difficult emotions, more capacity to respond wisely rather than react automatically. This is what Buddhism offers. Not a life free from anxiety, because that's not realistic, but a fundamentally different relationship with anxiety where it no longer runs your life. You learn to meet each moment, pleasant or unpleasant, with presence, wisdom, and compassion. You stop adding unnecessary suffering on top of unavoidable discomfort. You stop believing every thought your mind produces. You recognize the impermanent nature of all experience and rest in the awareness that's always present, always stable, regardless of what thoughts and emotions are passing through. This is true freedom. Not freedom from difficulty, but freedom in the midst of difficulty. The Buddha taught that we all have the capacity for this freedom. It's not reserved for monks or saints or special people. It's your birthright as a human being. Anxiety doesn't have to be your enemy. It can be your teacher, showing you where you're clinging, where you're resisting, where you've mistaken thoughts for reality. Each time anxiety arises, you have an opportunity to practice, to learn, to wake up a little bit more. So I want to challenge you to try this approach for the next week. When anxiety arises, instead of your usual response of fighting it or distracting yourself, try meeting it with curiosity and compassion. Investigate it like a scientist. Where is it in your body? How does it change moment by moment? What thoughts are present? Can you be with the discomfort without needing to fix it immediately? Can you offer yourself kindness in the middle of the struggle? This will feel unfamiliar at first. Your mind will tell you you're doing it wrong or that it's not working because the anxiety isn't disappearing. But remember, the goal isn't to make anxiety disappear. The goal is to change your relationship with it, to stop adding that second arrow, to reclaim your life from the tyranny of avoiding discomfort. Buddhism has been testing these teachings for 2,500 years across countless cultures and countless individuals. And they work. Not because they're magic or mystical, but because they're based on accurate observations about how the mind works and how suffering is created. Modern neuroscience and psychology are now confirming what Buddhism has taught all along. Mindfulness reduces anxiety. Self-compassion builds resilience. Acceptance is more effective than avoidance. Your relationship with your thoughts matters more than the content of your thoughts. You have everything you need right now to begin transforming your relationship with anxiety. You don't need special equipment. You don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to be a different person. You just need to be willing to turn toward your experience with curiosity and compassion instead of running away from it. This is the Buddhist path. Simple but not easy, profound but entirely practical. Your anxiety isn't a problem to be solved. It's an invitation to wake up, to see more clearly, to live more fully. Will you accept the invitation? The choice is yours, and it's available in every moment, including this one. If this video resonated with you, if you're ready to explore this path, I encourage you to start a simple meditation practice, even just 5 minutes a day of sitting quietly and observing your breath and whatever else arises. Join the thousands of people who are discovering that freedom from anxiety isn't about eliminating it. It's about transforming your relationship with it through ancient wisdom and consistent practice. Thank you for being here, and may you find peace in the midst of whatever arises.